Ray Mofield with the Oral History microphone, and we're visiting in the Brewers community today. We're in the home of Mr. and Mrs. Herman Cole. Herman, it's good to see you up this early in the morning.
Good to see you, Ray. We go way back.
Yes.
I've known you for quite some number of years.
I started back to Hardin High School as a sophomore, and your wife, then living, Mary Cole, was, well, I called her my English teacher. You know, I've thought about that Hardin faculty. Now, she taught a little bit of everything. She taught the home ec.
Right.
I had her for biology, general science, English. I don't know what all the poor woman did teach, but
several subjects.
yeah, there were only 3 high school teachers. Now, were you were teaching in the grade school?
Grade
then?
school.
Uh-huh.
7th and 8th grade.
Uh-huh. And of course, we were all there in that one building. We worked that year like dogs getting that building ready.
Right.
If you recall, in February of '37, the old high school building, well, not just the high school, but the whole school plant burned. And Mr. Holland was principal, and we cleaned brick, and the women sold chickens, and
Everything to get that building, the new building, built.
I know the school board, of course, had a problem. They didn't have any money, and back then, I guess they didn't have bonding capacity. We were still in the Depression.
Right.
If I remember correctly, the school board said, well, we'll operate it for you, but we can't build the plant.
Right.
I believe your father was on the board, wasn't he?
He was. Ira Cole.
Ira Cole.
He was on the board and at that time. And it was hard. I know they built the gymnasium, and it was hard. We finally got a heating plant in, and people worked and gave us their time. The teachers worked and helped get the thing in a little bit of order where we could use it.
That's right. And it really wasn't, I don't believe we played a game in it till mid-year of 38. It might have been 39, really, January.
It was.
January 39, before they played the first interscholastic contest. Well, there's so much of interest to talk to you. Let's establish that you were born in Marshall County.
At Brewers.
At Brewers. You want to tell how long ago? Just soon.
Well, March the 31st, 1913.
All right, so that's what you're old enough to report. You've got to be 65.
I'm 72,
Well,
going on 73.
You look about 35 anyway.
Well, I'm trying to keep myself in good shape. We have, since I retired 7 years ago at 65, we collected antiques for a while, then that wore out. Now I'm gardening and keeping busy.
We've just had a good shower. Oh, that was delightful. It fell slowly. There was no windstorm or lightning about it, and you had 0.8 of an inch here.
0.8.
I heard Benton radio say there was 58 hundredths at the official gauge in Benton, so we hope the whole county.
I hope the whole county got
had a good rain. Let's establish your father. His full name was
Ira Clark Cole.
And was he born in this county?
He was born in right within a half a mile of here.
Oh, is this part of the old farm place?
Well, just back of this woods here was where my grandfather's farm was.
What did your dad do as a
farmer?
He was a farmer. Okay.
We raised tobacco when I was a kid. We'd wagon and team, and we'd take the tobacco to Mayfield when I was a kid. We'd get up about 1 o'clock in the morning and get there by the time the sales went on.
You've been through it all.
I've been through the Depression, through the drought of 30s, and it was a pretty hard time on the farm.
Yes, it was. Now, your mother's name was
Alta Dunaway Cole.
Dunaway.
She was the daughter of Dr. E.T. Dunaway, who is in the
Lemon's History of Marshall County,
of
yes.
Marshall County. And her mother died when she was 8 years old, and he married again, Miss Cadra Ferguson, and moved to Murray and practiced medicine in Murray, then went to New Mexico, Arcadia, I believe it was, and he left a year or two before I was born and never came back.
You know anything about any other ancestors that you might mention?
Well, my mother's half-sister, I know, we had a letter from his widow, and she was going to school, getting her Ph.D. in journalism from Columbia University. She married
well, that sounds like myself.
Professor Cox from the Columbia University. He was a journalism teacher, and he had a Ph.D. And the way I understood it, he did write some of Franklin D. Roosevelt's speeches.
Oh, yes.
He was $1 a year employee of the government.
There were quite a number of those that.
And we've just lost out on whatever happened to her. And
now you, some of the Coles got here pretty early in time, or at least your ancestors, didn't they?
yeah,
You found them in Kentucky by what year?
they came to Kentucky somewhere around 1850 or before.
Now, some of your mother's folks arrived by what,
Well, now,
1796, was it?
No, that was my great-grandfather.
Great-grandfather. Okay.
Was born in 1796.
But that might have been Virginia.
It might have been where he... my daughter, Julia, which you should remember.
Oh, I remember
was just
her.
A kid.
Yeah, she was just a small child.
Now she's a grandmother, and I'm a great-grandfather.
Oh, I wish you hadn't said that, Herman. You just twisted the knife.
And my grandfather died in Texas and was brought back here in 34 and is buried in Murray at the Murray City Cemetery, which I never did see him. He just left, and I finally found some of my first cousins down in Tennessee around Ripley. One of my mother's brother left here and went down into Tennessee, and just last spring I got in contact with them, found them down there.
All right, now you were you grew up, and was there a one-room school around here? Did you go to Brewers or?
I went first year of school. I went to Phipps School. It's on the old Soldier Creek Road, just a little piece from where my sister lives out at Brewers. She lives on the old
Phipps, wasn't
Phipps
it?
School. Yeah. And Miss Meta Mathis was the teacher, and then it was consolidated with the school at Hale Spring, which was New Hope School, and Brewers High School was formed.
I remember when you could see Hale Spring running, and there was a little picnic ground there. It was about on Highway 80, wasn't it?
It was, right off of 80. Yeah. But getting back to my grandmother, the way she told the story, everybody that came into this section, into the purchase, would come to Wadesboro Springs, and then would fan out
from there.
And I
that
guess
was
buy
the
land.
Landmark.
Yeah.
Well,
which you are familiar with.
Well, of course, there was a land office there, and you could get a deed to a piece of property. And, the land was cheap. I believe it started out as $1.50 an acre. Later sold for even less than that at times. Boy, that sounds good, doesn't it? as far as buying, but of course the wherewithal to get that was rather dear.
That's right.
And they had a rough time paying for it in many cases.
Yeah, the three of us, my sister, Margaret Moeller, she taught at Hardin.
Yes,
too.
I remember her.
I believe she taught 42 years. And my brother Winston, who died in 1960, and the three of us, we had a 120-acre farm there, just east of Brewers. And my father's brother was Clint Cole, and his son is Earl Cole, and Blanche Lawrence. So
Now,
I don't have too many close relatives. Forrest, Ralph Terrell, Vida Edwards, and Ruth Cohn. Our grandfathers were brothers.
Now,
They were Republicans, and my splintered family were all Democrats. We're Democrats. It must have all started back during or just after the Civil War.
during the war, yes. All right, now, of course, when I say Miss Cole, which is the way we referred to your first wife, Mary, how did you meet her?
She was teaching at Brewers, and I would live there. She taught her first school.
Was she from this area?
She was from Trigg County.
Trigg County, well, that's nearby, adjoining county.
Near
Did she go to Murray State?
Western.
Went to Western.
Mhm. Graduated with a BS in home economics and minor in English. She taught 30 years. I taught 8, then worked 23 for TVA and about 16 for the Postal Service, which I worked 42 years and was never drew an unemployment check.
You just went from one job to another.
Which I always thought maybe that I was bettering myself with a different job.
Well, obviously, or you wouldn't have taken it. And since you, well, that's good. So you taught 8 years, and then you worked for TVA for a while, as many people did in the area.
Yes.
And then concluded as a mail carrier. Okay.
Rural mail carrier.
I remember, of course, I wanted a car so bad I could taste it. Dad was a sharecropper. Never had a car. Never learned how to drive, really. So I'd bought this old Model T, given $35 for it from a mail carrier named Gus Lamb. But I'd learned to drive. Ian Irwin had let me drive his Whippet, so I'd learned to drive a shift gear car. So I remember one day we were going to Murray for some sort of a contest. And Miss Cole was taking her car, and she'd asked me if I'd drive. And I remember it was a 34 Chevrolet. And it had knee action on it.
That's right.
You remember that car?
I remember that car.
Oh, it rode easy compared to a Model T.
Oh, yeah, that knee action.
Yeah. It'd get to rocking and just go up and down. Of course, with people in the car like Robert Holland, they just deliberately tried to make it rock all it would.
Yeah, I spent some time in the service, too. I left Hardin. We lived at Hardin when I went in service. Of course, I had a daughter at 8 years old, and I was 32 when I was drafted in the 1st of 44, and went into the infantry.
Where did you train?
Camp Blanding, Florida.
And from there you went where?
Fort Meade, Maryland, to England, to straight over to...
Were you in the D-Day group?
No. See, I just went in January of 44. But in July, I had landed in France at Omaha Beach. And
that was just a month after
yeah.
They landed June 6th,
Yeah.
44. And
It
then
was
by
about the middle of July. Went in. They still
there were still
landed on Omaha Beach,
Mhm.
and
Were there
went
any-
in as a replacement.
there were still bullets around.
There sure was.
Yeah.
We drove. They took us from Omaha Beach in trucks, and at night, and before the night was over, we were within machine gun range of the enemy. And I went into the Armored Infantry, 3rd Armored Division. That was the old Spearhead Division. And my first mission was to ride the tanks, the infantry riding tanks.
Yeah.
And that was in Normandy. And from Normandy, we all the way in through France, into Belgium, up the Meuse River, into Belgium, and near Aachen, Eupen.
Yes.
And on September the 12th, we went in. We were with the first group that went in on German soil.
Yeah.
And from then on, it got pretty rough.
It was pretty rough after that, and we just soon not talk about all those
That's
things,
right.
I guess.
But
It's part of our history, and you lived it.
I lived it, and I'm proud of it, and I wouldn't do it again for any amount of money. I feel that
But
I'm
you're glad
lucky.
you did.
I'm glad I did.
Yeah. Well, let's get off of that for a minute, and I'd like you to tell us what you remember about Brewers. 'Cause anything as it developed along, what was there when you can first remember? Was there a doctor that lived
There was
there?
Dr. Bean was there. We had 2 grocery stores. The Adlich, John Adlich ran a store, and the Chesters ran a store across the street. There was a little post office there, Brewer's Post Office. There was
Leon Riley told me a story about getting in trouble for moving that one time.
I've heard that story. That was way back before his time. Anyway,
Yeah.
there was Guy Chester was the postmaster, and they just had little pigeonholes up there. Mr. Henry Gardner would bring the mail from Hardin in a sack, and there's where they got the mail. People would just call for the mail there. However, we were about a half a mile east of Brewers. We had a mailbox. But that was a big time. My daddy took the St. Louis paper and Atlanta paper, and we'd read. First thing I'd do was look at the funny paper. But there was a doctor, and he had one of my good friends, buddies, was Forrest Bean, his son, and of course Mavis Lyles, and was one of them, and he had his office there. And when the old school burned in '27, the frame building caught fire in the old furnace. It was had the furnace down underneath the schoolhouse. It caught a fire down there, and it burned on a windy day. But to build that school back, the people would haul brick to build a building from Benton by teams.
Wagons and
Wagon
teams.
teams. And
Well, that was a job.
that was a job. That was all volunteer work. I know I made several trips, to Benton, load those brick up.
I remember playing games out there in later days, in Tom Trimble's day, for example, and they had a Delco. And I remember being out there one night when the plant quit running for some reason.
Right.
And all the lights went out, of course, so we had
I remember one time when I was just a kid, the Brewers Methodist Church was holding a revival there. And all at once, the lights went out, and some mean, I don't know, I guess it was just a trick, had cut the wire.
Oh, my.
From Dr. Bean. Dr. Bean had a Delco plant,
Mm-hmm.
furnished the power to the church.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know who did it. Doesn't make any difference. But, but
Ben Haley told me that you could tell some stories on Carl Johnson and Boris Utley. Would any of them be suitable to go on the air?
some of them wouldn't. I think most of them have been told on Boris. I could tell you one. You remember Monroe Wilson?
Oh, yes. Joe Hart's father.
Joe Hart's father. And I worked at the dam, and we had a sergeant that he told Judge, which we called Monroe was Judge,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to catch Herman cold. I'm going to catch him laying around or maybe asleep. So Judge called me up and told me, said, he's going to try to catch you. I said, he's not going to catch me. So it was snowing that night. So about the time he got there, I walked backwards up a long bunch of steps to a little lookout building we had there. So the sergeant came by. He looked at the steps coming down. Mm-hmm. And I was up there peeping down at him. That took the cake. Yeah. Didn't anybody ever tell him what had happened, but he looked all over for me.
Never could.
And then I finally came down, found him. I said, oh, yeah, I've been watching you. I know where all you've been. You want me to tell you just exactly where you been? I said, I've been watching you.
Oh, that's terrific. That's really great. Well, of course, later on, Miss Cole died.
That's right.
I don't remember the year.
69.
69, and you had this one daughter. Now, she married.
She married Gene Clark, Helen and George Clark's son.
Mm-hmm. And they live where?
They live in Maryland now.
Maryland.
Uh-huh.
And I noticed you had a beautiful picture over here of a 1985 graduation where that granddaughter is a bachelor's in radio, television, no less,
film.
from the University of Maryland. Oh, congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Now, you married again.
Yeah, Emma Lou.
And her name is Emma Lou.
Well, she was Emma Lou Heath, but before that, she is a Masterson.
Masterson.
Is her maiden name.
Was she from Marshall County?
She was from around Tell City, Indiana.
Tell City. That's right on the Ohio River. Why, she could look over into Kentucky all the time.
All the time.
Yeah.
I believe she came to Kentucky with her father, who was with construction at TVA. Mm-hmm. And they moved into the old Birmingham area, at Calvert City first, and then Birmingham. And so...
And you have this beautiful home here, and you do a lot of gardening, and I suppose you do some traveling.
We do.
You went to Maryland for the graduation?
Went to Maryland. We go up about twice a year.
Uh-huh.
One of her daughters lives in Toledo, Ohio. Mm-hmm. And she goes up there, and I go to Nebraska hunting.
Pheasants?
Pheasant hunting. and prairie chickens. When I first started, there was about 12 of us went. Now we've got down to 2, and sometimes 3 of us go hunting out there.
Junior Duke was never in that group, was he?
No.
I don't know whether he was a hunter or not.
No, I don't believe he's a hunter. Paul Crockett, you may remember him. Yeah. He lived in Benton at one time. He's the only one left of the original one. Jimmy Woolfolk goes with us.
You know, we're down to about 2 more minutes. Time gets away in a hurry. Can you think of any special something you'd like to tell? your life's most embarrassing moment, or the funniest thing that ever happened to you? Or...
I think the funniest thing was that walking up those steps backwards.
Well, he knew you had to have left because the track showed it, didn't he?
But yeah, he thought I had come down after the snow.
Yeah.
But I guess when I retired from the Postal Service, one of the things that impressed me most was they came out from the newspaper and interviewed me, and my last day, which was on my birthday, my 65th birthday, went out on Route 2, and Emily says, "I'm going with you." I said, "Why?" Well, anyway, we got out to Oak Level, and they had a big cake and a big present for me that everybody had donated, hunting equipment, hunting clothes, and so on. Then I went on to the next store over on the Copeland's ran it over on the Simpsonia Highway, and they had me a big present too. And when I finished up the route there near Ray Crowell place, coming back through Benton, they had a big sign, "This is the end." But that impressed me.
Yeah,
I mean,
of course, that would have been very touching.
I always thought that I tried to do a good job and serve the people. I've scraped pennies out with cold hands and stamped letters, which they're a little reluctant to do that anymore.
Yeah.
But
are you just as happy that you spent it in Marshall County? Or?
I am. I think Marshall County is one of the best places to live that I know of. I know when Emily and I go away from home, she gets back and she says, "Oh, isn't it good to be home?"
Yeah, that's about the way I feel. I'm sorry we're going to have to bring it to a close, and I appreciate your letting me come, Mr. and Mrs. Herman Cole, near Brewers, Kentucky. This is Ray Mofield with the Oral History Microphone, and we return you now to our studio in Benton.